Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I have to talk about Set a Watch. I played this for the first time this week and was just blown away, really blown away by how good this game is. There's so many great mechanisms in it. I could fill it with superlatives, given how much I enjoyed this game and how much I admire what the designer did with this game. It's really incredible. This is a cooperative game that plays up to 4 players. You always play with 4 characters, even if you play with fewer than 4 players. And you are basically a party in the middle of a fantasy wilderness. And I think the theme is that you're traveling from location to location within this world. There's no sense of traveling. There's a location card that changes during the game. And every round of the game, you're going to decide one or more members of your party who will stay back at camp and keep the fire lit, because you're just trying to survive the night. You're keeping this fire lit so that the monsters in the forest around you won't invade your campsite. And the other people at the table are fending off those monsters. They're actively fending them off and trying to keep them from getting to the camp. And I'm describing that theme because so many elements of the game tie back into that theme. I'll talk about them a little bit in the video. Let me start with my favorite mechanism, though, because I want to get that out of the way. If you just want to watch that, I understand. There's a lot more that I want to talk about in this game because it's such a tight, great cooperative game. My favorite mechanism in the game is that recently I did a video about skill tests, and this game has a form of a skill test in that you're rolling some dice and determining if you can defeat these monsters. But the key to this that makes it work so well is that you roll the dice first. It's one of the first things that you do in the round. Each player has 3 dice. You either have D6s or D8s depending on your character, which I love that as well. That you have, it's not a choice between dice, but you have different dice assigned to different characters. But you roll them first, and then together you figure out the puzzle of how you want to deal with this onslaught of monsters. And from the dice, you determine who needs to stay back at camp right now. So if I rolled really poorly one round, I might decide to stay back at camp. Also, camp incentivizes you to, you can heal extra if you have exactly a 6 die. So if you have a 6, you might go back to camp so you can heal a little bit extra. There's also doubles. There are certain very powerful things that you can do with doubles. So even if I roll really well, it might be a good idea to go back to camp and use those doubles for something powerful. Also, just a rule of the game is you need to have gone back to camp twice. You need to man the camp twice during the course of the game, or you cannot win the game. I believe I'm getting that. I think that was the rule that was mentioned to me. But overall, I love that you roll the dice first. They contribute to that decision of who goes back to camp, and also it contributes to what you do with the monsters. So in a lot of other games like this, you would see a monster and then you would roll dice to see if you defeat that monster. That isn't the case here. You've already rolled the dice. You know the numbers you have. You know the defense abilities on the monsters, and you need to decide with the other players, how are we going to kill these monsters? How are we going to assign these dice to these monsters? Because dice are essentially hit points. If a monster has 6 health and I have a 3 die and you have a 3 die, we can combine our dice together to defeat that monster. But I love that we already have that agency. We know the dice that we've rolled, so that we can decide to figure out that puzzle rather than having this idea of saying, I'm going to go after that monster. Will I actually get what I need to defeat him? Absolutely love it. I hope you can tell how much I truly love the choice this designer made, because I think 5 years ago, most designers would have made the opposite choice. They would have said, okay, we're going to put out these monsters. You're going to say, I want to target that monster, and then you're going to roll your dice to see if you defeated it. So that's definitely my favorite mechanism, that you roll dice first and then make all these interesting decisions based off that. One of the other little things I love about the game is that each character has 3 different powers out of 5. So there's a lot of really cool variability in this game too. So there's asymmetry in terms of which character you have, and that each character has 5 cards, but only 3 are active at any given time, or only 3 are on your mat at any given time. And those 3 are randomized at the beginning of the game. So even if you play the exact same character, you might have a little different feel. You can switch those cards out during the game, though, if you go back to camp and use an equip ability. But those cards are very interesting. They're very powerful cards, and you need it to win this game. But the cards are also your life. So I've seen games like this that use maybe a deck of cards as life. In this game, it's just those 3 cards are your life. And so if 3 of those cards are exhausted, flipped over to the backside, you die. We didn't have that happen in our game. I think something bad happens if you die, I'm assuming. But what happens here is a really interesting choice, because On your turn, usually if you are on the watch, not at camp, but on the watch, you can spend a die to put it on one of those cards to activate the ability. And so this does a few really cool things. One, it means that you can use your cool ability, which is great. Two, it means that even if you roll really poorly, it doesn't really matter. Also, for most of these abilities, it doesn't matter what the number is on the die that you put on the card. So you can use your ones or your twos to activate these cards. The other cool thing, though, is that another way to activate those cards is to flip them over, is to essentially deactivate them. And so there are times in the game that you might put a die on a card to activate it, and then also flip over that card to deactivate it, or to activate it again, but you end up deactivating the card itself. You don't even need to place a die there. You could just deactivate it. But it's your life, like I mentioned, that you only have those 3 life. So you have to decide, is it worth it for this right now for me to use that ability or not? If any of the monsters actually get through to you on any given round, you have this long row of monsters that you have to go through, then they're going to deal damage to you as well, and that will force you to flip those abilities over anyway. Another really cool decision there. I love that it's the choice between dice or flipping it over or doing both when you really need to. This is getting long, so I'll try to just focus on one other thing. Yeah, okay, so this is the other really cool thing, that you have this row of monsters that are coming out, and they're kind of coming out from the darkness, so you can't see all of the monsters. But the person who's back at camp is trying to keep the fire lit, and the bigger the fire is, the more monsters you can see in advance. So it's either 1, 2, or 3 monsters that you can see. Which is important. This is important for a few different reasons, both for like discussions between the players, and also because some players can only fight the first monster in the row. They have melee combat. Other characters can fight the second monster in the row, the first or the second, using their ranged abilities. So you want to be able to keep at least two of those cards exposed thanks to the fire, so that characters who have ranged abilities can use them. And the other reason this is important is that a number of the monsters have, I forget what it was called, but it's like if they are the first in the row, they have an ability that makes them much stronger. So they're so close to you, they're very strong at that time. And so a lot of our discussions during the game wasn't just, okay, who's going to take out which monster, but also when are we going to take out these monsters? Are we going to try to take out this monster with a ranged attack, so that that monster doesn't become the first monster in the row? That led to a lot of interesting collaborative decisions during the game, determining this puzzle of who takes out which monsters, how do we combine our dice, how do we use them, and when do we take out the monsters, because we don't want certain ones to get really close to the camp. I could go on. Really, this game is absolutely brilliant. I'm pretty sure it has a really nice price point, too. If you like cooperative games, honestly, I would say, I'm just going to say it, I normally don't gravitate towards cooperative games where bad stuff, just an onslaught of bad stuff happens to you. But this game is unique and special. I will say it is the best game in that category. If you like cooperative games where bad stuff happens and you have to deal with it to the best of your ability, and you come out feeling really powerful from it, I think this is at the top of that list. The only knock against it, perhaps, is that that there isn't really an engine building element to it. You're not getting better at the things that you're doing during the game. But I had such a good time with it, I don't care. Sometimes engine building just isn't necessary, and the game is still awesome. I normally don't recommend games, but I would based on that, if that's the type of cooperative game that you enjoy, I would highly, highly recommend Set a Watch. Oh, and I totally forgot to even hold up the photo. This is what it looks like when you're back at camp. This is the campfire that you're keeping lit, and these are some of the different things that you can do with your dice when you're back at camp. There are other things I didn't even mention on here. Set a Watch. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you have a favorite mechanism in it, or if you have a favorite mechanism, if any of these things that I've discussed today reminds you of a favorite mechanism that you have in a different cooperative game or any game, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks.